Well, thanks, Phil. Thanks, Daniel, for a great presentation. Moving on to the weather here, a very, very straightforward forecast. And I guess if we had one term to describe it, it would be very summer-like. Looking at the week in review, though, past week, remember about a little over a week ago, we had a passage from the remnants of what was Tropical Storm Cristobal, which came up through actually one of the westernmost paths of any tropical disturbance in the last 100 years. And it led to fairly widespread rains across northern and western parts of the state, but not as much in the east. But I think one of the big stories here, and it was somewhat less than expected, our mean temperatures for the week actually turned out to be quite a bit below normal. That's on the left here. You can see over most of the state, our mean temps anywhere from 2 to as much as 5 degrees below the normal, and that was the case over almost the entire region. So we've been up and down this growing season a lot, either from much below to much above normal. It has to do with the amplified pattern of the jet stream. The ridges and troughs are much larger than they typically are in a given year. That's something we see in the cold season, but not so much in the summer and the warm season. But for whatever reason this year, we've had a lot of those large ridges and troughs that have led to this roller coaster in temperature. Precip-wise, as I mentioned Cristobal, and we also had some thunderstorms the night after that with a frontal passage. But most of the state here, generally precip totals between half and 3/4 of an inch. A couple of exceptions with that, and it's worth noting here, the southeastern corner of the Lower Peninsula was missed again, generally. Less than, some cases, less than 1/4 of an inch down in that part of the state. But that area has just been, for the last 1 to 2 months, missed repeatedly. And as a result, certainly the topsoils have dried out rapidly. And in contrast to many other portions of the state, which have seen above normal precipitation, we got a very different situation. There's also some dryness up in the far western part of upper Michigan as well. But most of the state, as well as adjoining areas of Wisconsin, has seen above normal precipitation. And I think the next graphic I'm going to here, one of the themes that we're really watching here over the last few weeks is the rate of potential evapotranspiration. And what you see here from our EnviroWeather meso network, these are hourly potential evapotranspiration, and this is the reference value of potential evapotranspiration. And this assumes a standard 4-inch grass-covered unshaded surface. And it's essentially the reference that's used against all other crops, including things like seed corn or wheat or soybeans. You can relate to that reference, and it's what's used internationally. But the reason I wanted to bring this up here is that it has been, at least for the last 2 or 3 weeks, it's been unusually sunny. It's been windy as well across much of Michigan. But these rates of potential evapotranspiration, which represent the demand of water to the atmosphere based on meteorological conditions, have been very high or unusually high. And if you look here at the individual days, this goes back to last Thursday of last week. You can see very symmetrical type patterns here. Again, lots of sunny days. And our daily rates here are anywhere from typically from about 0.2 to 0.25, so 1/4 of an inch of water demand. Again, that relates back to, it doesn't mean an individual crop is that, but that's that reference surface. But the reason I brought this up is because these are high for Michigan, and they've been that way all the way back into late May, and it's resulted in rapid use of water, especially in the top of the rooting zone, top of the soil profile. As I mentioned, the driest areas of the state here are the western upper and the southeastern lower peninsula. Yeah, I inset here the drought response index here from USDA that gives general conditions based on the vegetative temperatures or surface temperatures. And you can see much of the state is very green, which is healthy, and lots of water present here, but it is getting browner and drier and drier gradually. And a lot of the reason is because of these high PET rates. You can see the weekly rates here, again, from 1.4 to as much as 1 3/4 inches. That climatologically for Michigan is, again, it's up near the top of the distribution that we would expect. So there has been, at least in areas where water is available, been rapid depletion. And at this time of the year, there's good and bad news about that, actually, with many of our annual crops. The bad news is, of course, for these young crops which establish themselves, these high rates of atmospheric demand can cause moisture stress, and we've seen that here, especially over the last few days. We will likely see it over the next couple of days as well. I'll get to that in just a second. So that's the negative. So there is temporary stress. The good news, or the longer term, is that there's also a lot of research that suggests when we do stress young crops with shallow rooting systems at this point in the season, that the plant actually responds by growing roots deeper more quickly. And that can play a very, very positive role later on when we typically have less water in the rooting zone. We have a better established rooting system. So there's again a good and a bad with this. And we've seen many cases or many years in Michigan where we get a very wet spring. Last year, 2019, would be one of these, and we don't have a very well-developed rooting system. And then we get dryness later on in July or August, and because of the shallow rooting, the crops are relatively more vulnerable to the lack of water. So a little bit of good and bad, but the issue is we are right now at a very high rate of water usage. Last thing about where we are too, our degree day totals with the cooler than normal week have fallen back just a little bit, but we're still running a little ahead of normal in terms of accumulations here since May 1 across the southern parts of the state, and still behind by a few days in the far north. So not much of a change there. Well, looking ahead here, I mentioned a very summer-like forecast, and that's definitely what we see on the map this morning. High pressure to our east here over Ontario, over into New York. That's been in full control of our weather for the last several days, and will continue to be for at least a couple more days. Two weather systems of note here, one off to our south and east down over Virginia, an area of low pressure, which has been there for the last couple days, and it will be there for the next couple days. And then another here off to our west. That weather system is the next major weather maker for us, but it's going to take a long time to get here. The high pressure is going to hold its ground for a couple more days. Here's the map as of tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. You can see the frontal boundary to our west gets a little bit closer. We will see the chance for some showers and thunderstorms beginning tomorrow afternoon, probably in sections of western upper Michigan, but not in the rest of the state probably until late on Saturday, and better chance on Sunday and Monday. Here's the weather map forecast for Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. You can see, again, not a whole lot of movement. This thing's not in any hurry to get here. But right now, it does look like the best chances for rainfall in much of the state will be overnight Saturday, and then a little bit even better on Sunday, on Father's Day, especially during the afternoon hours. And because of the slow movement of this, even after the front passes, it's going to stall out and sit there for a few more days. So we will have a continuing chance for more rain into the early part of next week, probably even into Wednesday. And thinking back about Daniel's comments on spray, the comment would be, we've got great conditions here for spring, unusually calm conditions. We've had such a windy spring and early summer thus far. And you've seen this probably over the last couple of days, because of that high pressure sitting right over the top of us, there's relatively little pressure gradient, and the winds have been light, even during the day, light and variable. They will be again today and tomorrow, even into Saturday. But then after that, of course, the risk is going to be precipitation, or the probability of precipitation or possibility. It does not look like a widespread event in terms of rainfall coming here this weekend. The totals here forecast for the 1 week are really, in most cases, a quarter to half inch, which is on the lighter side. One exception to that would be if you look here off to our west, we are expecting to see some fairly heavy rain from the southern Great Plains north and eastward up through the western Corn Belt, and even into the Great Lakes for the western part of and central portions of the Upper Peninsula. There we could see 1 to 2 inches, but that again is more the exception, and you can see over most of lower Michigan here only a quarter to half an inch. So one of the take-homes is we are looking at a very warm summer dry period here for the next couple of days, and given where we've been, the water will certainly be welcome, I think, this weekend for most crops, but it probably will not be enough to, at least to change greatly that situation with a lack of water in the topsoil. It should help And there will be multiple chances of it, but not looking for any widespread heavy precipitation. One last thing, temperatures here over the next several days will still be on the increase and will be low to mid 80s to in the north to mid 80s in the south today. A couple degrees warmer than that. We probably will hit 90 tomorrow in many spots, and then again on Saturday. And then when that front moves through, we'll drop off several degrees cooler than that. In the medium range time frame here, the forecast guidance does suggest some changes. The ridge, the upper air ridge that's over us right now, is forecast to move off east out into the Atlantic and be replaced by a troughing feature that you can see right here. This is for the 23rd through the 27th, and that would result in ultimately a decrease in our temperatures back to somewhat below normal levels. I'm not looking for anything really cold, but certainly cooler than it is now, or it will be over the next couple of days. And again, that should be noticeable by the middle part, the latter part of next week. At the same time, note that there will be relatively frequent chances for precipitation with above normal precipitation totals also forecast for the same time frame. And then beyond that, I don't have the 8 to 14 day outlook here, but it does suggest even further changes, still normal to above normal precip totals in the 8 to 14 day time frame, which takes us into the beginning of July. But temperature-wise, it suggests that there will be some, basically a more zonal west to east pattern with the jet stream, and that would lead to a moderation in temperatures back to normal or even above normal levels here by the end of June, early July type time frame. So we're on a little bit. It's a fairly typical summer pattern, but cooler weather expected next week, but then moderation back to warmer than normal by next weekend. So overall here, again, sunny, warm, dry for the next couple days, and then our next major chance for precipitation over most of the state here this weekend, especially on Sunday. Very high or abnormally high PET rates are expected through Saturday, at least with that warm, dry weather, and we probably will see more symptoms of moisture stress, especially during the afternoon. The rainfall this weekend should help, but most areas it is not expected to be a widespread heavy event, similar to what we've seen during a lot of the growing season thus far. But next week there will be more cooler temperatures and more chances for precipitation. With that, I'll move on with a reminder for our next week's virtual breakfast, and that's going to be Vicki Marone speaking about organic field crop production. Again, that's next Thursday, the 25th, so join us for that if you can. And with that, I will wrap up and turn it back to Phil here to talk about credits, etc.
Phil, I have a question for Jeff.
Okay.
And I know the farmers are really enjoying this calm, windless days and a lot of herbicide going out. Has this been an abnormally windy spring? Do you record that?
It's interesting. It has. And there are, and it's not just Michigan, it's across much of the Midwest. And several people in my discipline have noted that. And we do not have statistics yet, but a couple of folks in other states have put together the numbers, and it has been significantly windier this growing season, late spring and the early summer versus normal. And again, it has to do with that jet stream pattern with lots of ridges and troughs. But yes, the answer definitely is yes, it has. And so it's been unexpected the last few days during the daytime. We haven't had those 15, 20 mile per hour winds. It's been relatively light and variable depending on where you are. It's a noticeable change.
Bruce asked, what is the potential for severe thunderstorms in the mix this weekend? We're starting to see irrigation systems moving across the Southwest.
Right. I think basically right now the way it looks, and it could change, but right now not expecting anything in terms of a major severe weather outbreak. If anything, there might be some localized heavier rain, but don't see anything like what we saw last week with high winds, that type of thing. So it should be your generic run-of-the-mill garden variety thunderstorm showers and thunderstorms here. That's at least the way it looks right now.